Which optics are the best in Apex Legends? This is an attempt to be as objective as possible, not subjective, meaning this is more data-driven than derived from personal experience. Yeah, I have my preferences, but I'm not going to let that be the ruling factor in all of this. We're going to take a look at advantages, visual clarity, and on-screen bulk of each optic to discern which are the best and which ones just aren't worth your time. First, we have the 1x ACOG, or the red dot sight. If you had to ask people, I'd say this is preferable to 99% of people. It's very rare that someone's going to say the 1x holo is a better pick. It really is the best 1x optic that you could possibly use. The main reason is there's little to no visual bulk. The mounting system on the bottom of the sight doesn't make your gun cover much more of the screen real estate, and the frames on the left and right are super thin. Not to mention the red dot in the middle is a lot easier to aim with than any other sight. However, it does make it feel like you have to be a lot more precise with your shots, particularly at mid to long range, but with the small size of the red dot, it's easy to just hover over your opponent, make sure your shot is precise before you fire, and seal the deal. Now we get into the 1x holo, which is basically what you hold on to until you get a 1x ACOG. The scope is often favored on the Volt, and I can attest, I don't know what it is, but it just feels really good. If I had to guess, I'd say it has to do with the really good accuracy of the gun anyway, and the mostly vertical recoil, so you're not really going to feel it too much. However, I will pass up this optic and rock iron sights for anything except the hemlock. If I have a hemlock, well, beggars can't be choosers, right? And yes, that means I would rather use the G7 iron sights than the 1x holo. I know that sounds crazy, but honestly, the 1x holo just, I don't know, doesn't feel that good. I don't feel like my accuracy's on point with it. The main reason is just because it's so obstructive. You have this thick frame, the crosshair takes up a good portion of the middle, so you can frame a target, but it feels like it's kind of covering them a little bit, especially if you're trying to track. It doesn't feel better than the 1x ACOG, but overall, you could do worse. Then we have the digital threat scope. This is good depending on what gun you use it on. It's okay on the Wingman, it's great on the alternator for some reason, and it does well in other SMGs just like the R99 here. You'll have times where this helps you and times where it actually hurts you. I mean, it's not like we have a Bangalore and Caustic meta going on, so it's not necessary for every game. Speaking of which, it's important to note for you fellow controller players, aim assist dies in smoke and caustic gas. So a digital threat is going to be massive here for visibility, but your aim will feel completely off. Personally, that's why I don't like the digital threat, is because maybe from those experiences, maybe this is muscle memory, I just feel like my aim isn't as good as it could be when I'm using it. However, the sight does feel really clean. The edges of the scope, the frame of it rather, isn't too visually obstructive. The mounting on the bottom isn't that bad. You have that little lever over on the left, but that's not really going to obstruct you at all. And having the white in the center is, I don't know, it's just very clean feeling, even if you're not mainly using it to highlight enemies in smoke or gas. Obviously, it wouldn't make much sense for them to have a red crosshair or reticle in the center where it's highlighting enemies in red, but overall, it's a good scope, it's clean, you really can feel like your aim is off sometimes. And last but not least, we have the 1 to 2x holo with the 1x variant. This is a fantastic sight. It reaches a middle ground in between the ACOG and the holo sight. The frame is noticeably thicker, the bulk on the bottom for the mounting system is a bit more, but it's not really too obstructive. Nothing you're going to notice while you're hip firing or anything like that. However, the red dot and red circle in the center aren't blurry like you can sometimes experience with the 1x holo, so you end up with a clear picture of your enemy when you look down the sights. Even just as the 1x, this is something I often use on the R99 or even the Volt. It works well on guns like the G7 or Hemlock, which can be used close range but work better at mid-range on the 2x setting. And swapping between them is absolutely necessary if you want to maintain good accuracy at different ranges. Alright, now we get into the 2x scopes. We have 3 to look at, and since we're already talking about it, let's just go with the 1 to 2 holo scope when it is zoomed in. When you do zoom in, you get a visual indicator on the reticle to let you know that you're at the 2x. Not only does it say zoom 2x at the bottom right there of the mounting system, but you get these little lines on the edges of the circle, and you'll notice a upside down T pattern goes at the bottom of the circle, breaking out of it so that you can tell, okay, I'm definitely in the 2x setting. Overall, it's a solid 2x sight, but the only issue with it is that, at least for controller players, mouse and keyboard players won't experience this. If you have any Call of Duty experience where you had to constantly sprint to get out of harm's way, you might be used to just clicking the left analog stick in and out, or if you don't have auto run enabled, so you may end up spamming in and out while you're trying to fire at someone, and that can really mess you up. Moving on, we have the Times Bruiser, which has to be the all-around best sight in the entire game. Don't at me, I'm just going to call it now. You get a great level of zoom, but you also have similar pros to the 1x ACOG that we talked about earlier. The left and right of the sight is super clean, so you're not really going to have any obstruction here. There's nothing along the top, so if you have to aim up, especially if you see a Horizon on lift or a Valkyrie moving up, you can move up with no obstruction getting in the way of you tracking that enemy. And that can happen sometimes with the 1 to 2x holo. However, it can be a bit tricky to land your shots because of the vertical reticle here. You want the tip of the arrow to hover your opponent's chest if you can, so that way the kickback from an assault rifle could give you a couple of headshots if the enemy is standing still, or if you're using this on a longbow or a sentinel, you can aim here and then just gently move up to account for bullet drop over 100 meters, maybe a little bit above their head if you have to, and land some sick headshots to begin a fight. The Bruiser is arguably the most versatile sight in the game. It's great for assault rifles, but it's also good for SMGs like the R99 here, LMGs, and even sniper rifles if you're using them at mid-range. Get used to this sight, and because of the slight zoom over the 1x, you're actually going to be helping yourself with recoil control as well. You're going to have to, pull down on the stick a bit more, or pull back on the mouse just a little bit more when you're firing at people, which will help you in the long run with aim training. Lastly in this category, we have the 2-4 ACOG on the 2x setting. I'm going to level with you right now, guys, and I may get flack for this. I enjoy the sight, however, it's not high tier in the slightest. There is so much visual clutter when you zoom in. It's kind of jarring when you look at the other sights in the game. There's a lot of visual bulk here. You have the dial on top, what looks like a lens cap on the top right. You have I don't even know what it would be called, I'm not good with guns, but you have this bulk on the bottom left as well. Overall, there's just a lot of visual clutter around the screen. Tracking enemies or finding another target if you're firing at a team when one goes behind cover, it can be a little bit tricky. This can be used on assault rifles, but if so, try your best not to put it on the 4x setting. Does fine on the 2x. It's like having a really bulky bruiser, if you want to think of it that way. Just try to avoid zooming in. You can still see what's going on the left and right a little bit here, but the big issue with the 2-4 ACOG is you will get tunnel vision. And on a 2x setting, where you're kind of close in a mid-range fight, you're going to want to have a bruiser scope more than you will a 2-4 ACOG. Just so you guys know, the 2-4 ACOG is not making it high on the tier list at the end of this video. The only 3x in the game, the Ranger serves a special purpose for the G7 Scout, Sentinel, Longbow, and especially here on the R301. It's harder to control ARs with this scope, as you might imagine, but if you're utilizing full range properly, you can actually, just like with the Bruiser, control your recoil and train it a little bit, but also the 3x on the R301, the most consistent gun in the game, just feels really, really good. There's no competitor in the 3x optic space, but if you play on a lower sensitivity or a lower DPI, the 3x might screw you over in close range situations. High sensitivity players will still be able to hold their own, but keep in mind you should always have a proximity weapon in the back pocket if you have a long range gun as your primary. If it's on an assault rifle or any automatic really, you're going to have to rely on hip fire at close range unless they can, the enemy backs up 10 or 15 meters. If anything, it's good for hip firing, and if they're on the run, you can zoom in to hit them in the back when they're running away. With the Ranger scope, you have no top on the sight, similar to the Bruiser and the 1x ACOG, which is really, really big here, and a clean red dot in the center. It's pretty easy to headhunt with this scope, and because it's not restricting on the sides, even though it is a bit bulkier than the Bruiser, which is to be expected, you don't get tunnel vision like you do with the 4x setting on the ACOG scope, like I'm about to talk about. Overall, the 3x is one of the best sights in the game. We've been over the tunnel vision issues here before. The main problem with this scope is that when you use it on a marksman weapon, such as the G7 Scout, with decent bullet drop, if you try to use it at 4x range, you're going to see your bullets drop off and your accuracy is going to decrease. The 2-4 ACOG to me feels a lot less reliable, and in my experience where you get that range that you're not used to, since it's the only optic that can go on a marksman weapon with a 4x range, it kind of throws you out of your comfort zone where you're most likely going to be used to picking up 1x, 2x, and maybe even the 3x optics. If you want to use the 4x optic on a sniper rifle, please reconsider. It's not the worst sight in the game by any means. I'm not trying to be over dramatic here. However, at 4x range, you're going to be in tunnel vision mode anyway because you're looking at this target that's really far away, so you're not going to be looking around you anyway. There's no reason to not swap it out for a 4 to 8x sniper scope. And if you don't like that because of the blackened edges, I completely understand. I used to be the exact same way, but the problem with the 4x ACOG is your accuracy will drop because you don't have distance values that you can use to adjust for headshot damage and maybe even just hitting body shots if you're shooting over 100 meters or even over 150 meters away. With guns, especially the Longbow, it has more of a bullet drop than the Sentinel does, so you're gonna really screw yourself over if you're trying to use a 4x ACOG on the Longbow. Apex is a fast-moving game, and because of that, you want an optic that can help you track quickly. It's why the 2x and 3x seem to be the sweet spot for just about every gun in the game. With the 4x setting on the 4 to 8 sniper scope, you give up peripheral vision that you don't have to give up with the 4x ACOG. And I know that can seem like a big trade-off here, but the thing is, if you're already in tunnel vision mode, it's not going to be that big of a deal. The main benefit of using the 4 to 8x sniper scope on the 4x setting over the 2-4 ACOG on the 4x setting is because you get distance values. See how it says 62 meters right there? That is the distance from where I'm standing to the target. Now that's to the rock, is 135 meters. Over 100 meters, you're going to see serious bullet drop, even with any sniper, whether marksman guns, if you're going to see it on a repeater, a scout, there's going to be bullet drop. That's one of the mechanics of Apex Legends that you cannot avoid. So what you need to do is use the meters on the right to account for your shots. You'll see a little 2, 3, 4, and 5 kind of smushed together there underneath the crosshair in the center of the screen. That's going to tell you right away, without having to zoom in or adjust, if the target is 300 meters away, or even up here, these are nearly 400 meters away. If I shoot right here, it's not going to hit with that bullet drop. Because it's 400 meters away, we go to the 4 as the value, and I hit my shot. You're not going to get that on a 2 to 4 ACOG. If you don't want to use this optic, I fully understand. I was the exact same way. As a matter of fact, now I'm going to cut to some gameplay of me earlier today using the Sentinel in the 4 to 8 times optic, and we ended up winning the game, partially because of the damage I was able to deal and keep a team back with the 4 to 8 times. If you play on a higher FOV, you need that magnification. If you play on a lower FOV, targets are already appearing to move slower on screen, so you're going to be able to line up headshots far easier. Basically, there is no reason to not use the 4 to 8 times, even though we think, oh, I'm going to give up that peripheral vision. Here's the thing, a lot of teams will just W key absolutely every single fight, which is why we have complaints currently in Season 9 with the Spitfire meta, because people are getting shredded even at close range. Don't let them get close range. Use one of these long-range optics, break the enemy, build your Evo shields. It's going to come in handy a lot more than it feels like right now. Once you start prioritizing it over a 2 to 4 ACOG or even a 3 times Ranger, which I know hurts to think of, you're going to see a lot of benefits. You will see instances where it doesn't help you the most, but it's kind of that gray area. You have to know your playstyle and how it's going to adapt to it. But overall, the 4 to 8 times optic is actually a really good sight. Okay, back from that little clip, we come back to the 6 times sniper scope. Now, I know we all love to mock this sight, and I mean, even Respawn puts it on the lowest level of the longbow in arenas. I think the lowest upgrade, at least, at the time of recording this video, you know? This comes in handy, but since you can't zoom and you're locked at 6 times magnification, the lack of options, especially compared to the 4 to 8 times sniper scope, is very restricting, and it doesn't make us feel like, oh, I definitely want to pick that up. However, you still do get those distance values on the right, which come in handy a lot more than you think. And hey, if you really hate the 6 times, just think about it this way. The Kraber's base zoom is 6 times, not 4 times like everyone else thinks. So you're probably already more familiar with using the 6 times optic than you think. Now we get into the other half of the 4 to 8 times sniper scope. Honestly, the 8 times is really good if you're third partying or if you're stuck in terrible zones in World's Edge where it's all just rocks and hills and just geometry getting in the way. It can help you keep pushy enemies at bay. If you continuously hit 70s on your Sentinel, you can keep them behind cover and sway the fight. It comes in handy, but enemies will move at the same speed regardless of what optic you use. So finding your ideal per optic sensitivity on this is tricky to say the least, and I think you should definitely toy around with per optic sensitivities, especially if you're going to use the 8 times. Personally, I'm a controller player. I am using a Control Freak thumbstick extender, or what is it called? A precision thumbstick, something like that. But I'm also using precision rings on my analog sticks, so I have it at a slightly higher sensitivity, but it acts as if it's on a lower sensitivity. And still, I move it gradually without overdoing it to get a good hit with the 4 to 8 times. Find out what works for you, but keep in mind the 8 times is actually pretty good. Okay, last but not least, the sight we also love to kind of mock, or at least stray away from, is the, what is it called exactly? The 4 to 10 times digital sniper threat. Now, you're only going to see this in care packages, you're not going to find it in ground loot, and you will only really find it in-game or run into it often if you find fully kitted sniper rifles in a black market, or if you land on top of the waterfall area outside of Hammond Labs in Olympus. For the most part, you're not going to see this sight often, which is why it is definitely on the bottom of the tier list. The thing is, this is more about ability than it is about zoom. It highlights enemies, we already know that, but one other thing it does, similar to how the 1 times digital threat has a white reticle so that it's not confused when highlighting enemies in red, you have green lines on this that help you highlight an enemy, but the cool thing is, I don't see any obstruction when it's going over an enemy's head. Whether it's on the 6 times or it's on the 10 times, it's really clean. It's easy to track your enemies like it's nobody's business. One thing here is because it is perceived as a digital scope instead of a analog or manual scope, you don't get that push-pull zoom like you do with the 4 to 8 times when you zoom in. That's not really the biggest deal, but the cool thing here is you can zoom in, land a shot, zoom back out to track them as they're moving, or vice versa. Track them, zoom, snipe, pull back out. Whatever the case is, it's a really good optic, and those numbers, the distance values, the 2, 3, 4, and 5, well, right here, it's just a 2 and a 5 all mashed up from the looks of it. But when you zoom in, those adjust instantly as well. So that way, those precious seconds when an enemy is trying to get behind cover, you can actually snipe them and have a better reaction. But once again, you're not going to run into this that often, which is kind of a bummer because it is a good sight when you get used to it, but you don't have the opportunity or time to get used to it. Alright guys, this is the tier list. Now that you know the ups and downs of every optic, you can see why I arranged them the way that I did on the tier list. You can either choose to rock your iron sights depending on what's available, or finally start sniping from a distance with that 4 to 8 times scope, where your opponents can't kill you with a wingman and ruin your mid-range fights. Do me a favor, comment below, do you agree with this list? Are there some optics that you just absolutely love that maybe other people don't? Whatever the case is, what optics are you rocking? And if you want to at me for the 2 to 4 ACOG, feel free. I know that was partially controversial, but despite having liked it in the past, when you really look at it and how bulky it is, it's just not the best choice. Either way, leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next guide.